Welcome to The Effective Lawyer, a podcast for ambitious attorneys who want to improve their practice. My name is Jack Zinda, and I'll be your host. Today, we're going to talk about part 2 of winning difficult cases. And with me to talk about that, I've got my law partner, Burgess Williams, and one of the top trial lawyers in this room, Neil Solomon.
Hey, Jack. Good to be here.
And as always, our brand manager, Kelsey Balsey. Hey, Kelsey.
Hi, Jack.
How's everybody doing today?
Excellent.
I'm as good as you can be after a 5-hour expert deposition, but otherwise I'm pretty good.
And you're like 2 weeks away from baby number 3?
May 23rd, yeah, 2 weeks away. So excited and scared. We have a lot of young little kids running around, but it's fun.
Gonna have to get a bigger van.
No van yet, Jack. We're holding out. It's not happening.
Forward to meeting number 4.
No, number 4. No vans, no kid number 4. That's the don't play this video in another 2 years.
I know, right? Well, last week we talked a lot about government claims, and I thought this was such a good topic. We cover more, different types of cases that we've handled that maybe are a little unusual. I know one type of unusual case, Neil, you've handled some are ATV cases, which, I would have not necessarily considered a case that we would take maybe 5 years ago, but we've handled quite a few of those at this point. So tell me about those types of cases.
Yeah, so ATV cases or UTV or whatever you want to call them, but these all-terrain vehicles, and especially I think when you're in states like Texas, where a lot of people have ranches or land or just like using them, we hear of these cases, unfortunately, all too often. And I was just even yesterday reading the news about one that is not one of ours, but really tragic circumstances. But the couple examples that I have are I look at it 2 main scenarios. One is it's usually a child that shouldn't be on one that gets really hurt. And the other one is that somebody gets on with a drunk person and they get really hurt. And those are kind of the 2 main ways that I see those, at least where there's an ATV type of injury or type of case. And it's against someone's negligence for either entrusting the vehicle or the actual negligence of the driver of the vehicle.
I mean, being drunk on an ATV is a bad idea.
Yeah, evidently, it's kind of like driving a car or any other activity. It can be unsafe, and especially these where there is no seatbelts, they're not using one. They're supposed to be using helmets, they're not using them. Sometimes they have roll bars, sometimes they don't. It's just a really dangerous activity, and people don't, unfortunately, treat them that way.
The first one of these we handled, one of the first questions we had is, okay, what is the source of recovery in a case like this? Because you don't typically have ATV insurance, or maybe you do. Tell me, what do you look at for a source of recovery in those cases?
Yeah, so in that case, the one that comes to mind, it was a young girl who had gotten hurt. If I remember right, I think she was 7 at the time, and she gets taken out by a neighbor's boyfriend out to his property to go ride on a 4-wheeler. And she literally gets a 30-second lesson of watching what to do, and then is given the keys to go do it. And so, in that instance, we're able to find some insurance coverage through the owner of the property, the owner of the ATV. You're looking at potentially the driver if it's somebody else that's there. And we actually have found specific ATV coverages. But I think ideally you're looking for some sort of ranch or homeowner's insurance policy. And a lot of times there'll hopefully be a larger policy that comes with that. So hopefully you're looking for at least $1 million in coverage to cover the damages.
And I think that's a good point. So the 2 places you want to look are an ATV policy, which may not be very large. If it's on the property, that property's homeowner's insurance, or the homeowner's insurance or ranch insurance of the person who owned the ATV, or even potentially the person that lent the ATV to the person. Because in our experience, there's usually 3 places that occur: on public land, someone's camping, on someone's private property they own, or someone else's private property and they brought the ATV to the property. What about issues involving kids in those cases? I mean, that's got to be tough to prove liability if they're driving the ATV themselves.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I was going to. In this particular case, we're able to go forward on a negligent entrustment claim. And so just looking to your state and really finding good rules, I think, is really helpful in those types of cases. And so going to, eventually you may need an expert or want to have one, I guess I should say, but you don't necessarily need one early on. You just look at the manuals and they will state quite clearly, make sure the person's 16, make sure they're trained, make sure all these different factors. And a lot of times just by them handing them the keys over to someone that's unlicensed would fall under that negligent entrustment and the elements that you're going to need to prove.
Another thing that you always need to be on the lookout for, and these cases, but any type of case where the injuries are catastrophic and your source of recovery is not sufficient, is a products angle. There's lots of products cases against these ATV manufacturers for not making these vehicles safe enough. So that's something you always want to keep in mind.
No, exactly. If it rolled over and it shouldn't, different precautions like that. The other thing you want to know is if it performed as designed and someone got hurt, you don't have a case, because some products are deemed inherently dangerous, and you can't, for example, if you get hurt on a motorcycle because there's no seatbelt, you're not going to have a claim because that's part of riding a motorcycle. So that makes it an interesting wrinkle on those.
Yeah, the other thing to look out for is the basically aftermarket additions on those. And so you can lift them or put kind of mud tires on them or different bars on the top or handles, other things that can be there. And so depending upon the manufacturer of those, that's another angle to look at, or another potential responsible third party for the first entities you go after to try to point the finger at for your injuries. I've definitely heard, and I know some prior firms that have handled some cases where there's literally been amputations of people's hands after it rolls over, and the roll bar can cause some pretty serious stuff. So it's definitely want to look through all those different angles to see what sources of recovery are available.
It also makes you a much more cautious parent. I don't know if you guys seen that. Like, I look at everything as a potential cause of action now.
Yeah.
And ATVs just is one of those areas where you got to know what you're doing. You don't want to just get on there and be an idiot. The other good thing about those cases, as far as proving liability, is most people will agree if it involves a child that they should not have been riding it. So you can ask the person that lent it, would you agree that they should not have ridden this, ATV? And because the child is not old enough to make a decision themselves, you can ask them that question, would you have let them do it now if you knew what you knew now?
Yeah. One of the good things is that if it is a child case, a lot of the time, if you're able to, if they have insurance, then the person who owns it is happy to give you whatever you want on a silver platter to make their insurance pay, because they feel really bad. And so they want to try to, and say, you're right, I shouldn't have done it, I screwed up. And they're kind of happy to help you move that case forward. There's always the risk of them blaming the parent or something else, but you need to watch out for that. But you can find that sometimes are helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that also kind of means don't necessarily be an aggressive jerk in the beginning, right? Because that could limit your ability to do that. I know another type of case that we've handled quite a bit of, which I never considered, before a few years ago, are shooting injury and death cases, which unfortunately are really common. And we're not talking about an intentional tort where someone goes out to kill someone. We're talking about an accidental shooting. Burgess, have you handled any of those?
Yeah, quite a few. They're interesting cases because, as you know, firearms are very dangerous, and you have to follow a lot of safety rules to make sure that people around you, including yourself, are free from harm. And we see quite a bit that people are just careless with guns, and oftentimes alcohol is involved. And I really like the shooting cases because when you're handling a firearm, there are so many rules, and it's an area where safety rules are so important and so inherent, and it's really easy to establish what the proper behavior is and show rule violations that allow you to make your liability case and show a jury how dangerous this person was to the people around them.
Well, a lot of times when you're bringing the case to trial, you may want to actually be in a conservative jurisdiction. I don't think it's about pro-gun or anti-gun. most people that are pro-gun believe that you have a responsibility to handle a gun safely, right? And so I know in those cases, a lot of times our experts are NRA instructors, who teach people how to use firearms appropriately. And you'll find jurors be really upset at somebody who doesn't follow the rules on how to have a firearm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've had experts who are instructors in concealed carry classes, and former police officers. Those are the types of people you want to talk to figure out, okay, what should this person have been doing? And this is what a reasonable gun owner or handler would be doing in some circumstances.
I remember one time this was probably one of the most difficult cases that we've handled, was a case where a person had brought their vehicle to a charity car wash, and a really, really sad case. Left it there, and they had left a loaded gun on the seat, just out. And one of the kids picked it up and shot the other kid. And it was really tragic because that one child who shot the other one ended up going to prison. We didn't believe, it didn't appear to be an intentional act. They were just messing around. And when we took the defendant's deposition, he took a very unreasonable position that he did nothing wrong. He would do exactly the same thing again. And that really made a big difference in the case. I think if he had fallen on the sword, he probably would have, had a much better outcome than he did.
Yeah, tragic circumstances. That's another thing that goes with gun ownership. Not only do you have to handle them carefully when you're around people, but you need to store them in a secure manner. And in this particular case, that the loaded gun was just left in the glove box, and teenagers were given access to the car. So,
Zinda Law Group is a plaintiff's personal injury law firm made up of over 30 lawyers that handle catastrophic personal injury and wrongful death cases throughout the United States. We regularly co-counsel and joint venture with firms across the country. Over the last several years, we have paid millions of dollars in joint venture co-counsel fees to the law firms we work with. If you are a law firm or attorney and have a catastrophic personal injury or wrongful death case you would like to joint venture or work with Zinda Law Group on, please reach out to us at 800-863-5312 or email us at info@zdfirm.com, and we can set up a time to discuss your case.
What about us? This is another kind of weird source of recovery issue. So what are the sources of recovery that you all have seen? Obviously, you typically don't have gun insurance,
Yeah, it's homeowners, and hopefully there's not any exclusions. I don't think I've ever seen a homeowner's policy in these cases where their coverage was excluded. I think insurance companies are very fearful of these cases because typically the harm that occurs when somebody negligently discharges a firearm is pretty significant. And there are liability cases that, if you put it together right, you can clearly show that whoever fired the gun was at fault, or whoever owned the gun negligently entrusted it. Typically, you're looking at a homeowner's policy for coverage.
Yeah, I mean that's the main place you'd be looking at. I know we're looking at another case now. I was talking to another attorney in the firm in Colorado that we're filing on relating to the actual landlord who potentially knew that the homeowner, or the renter rather, had a gun and had previously misfired in their home before. And then next thing you know, he misfires a second time on a different date. It goes through the wall and it hits our poor client who's just there trying to use the restroom, and when he gets struck in the gut. So, there's some different theories of trying to go after to find that source of recovery. But for the most part, I think it is going to be that homeowners or renters policy. And then you're going to find that the person's going to say they didn't mean to do it, because obviously there's criminal ramifications if they say it otherwise. So,
and you do not want to plead that they did it intentionally, and unless you want the insurance company to say no coverage. So it always needs to be pled as negligence and gross negligence, not intentional conduct.
Never plead intentional conduct. That's like such a gift to the insurance company. I can't believe how many cases we've had where guns have gone off and hit people through a wall. We've had at least half a dozen. It's just insane how many people think it's a good idea to clean a gun at a party, or when friends are over, or it's loaded. I mean, it's just insane.
Well, Burgess, you're from Florida, so I mean, y'all have like gun cleaning parties, don't you?
Yes, yeah. Our favorite
Just a
pastime.
panhandle picnic. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Apologies to all of our Florida listeners.
We're from Texas. I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, what are some other types of interesting cases that are kind of more difficult when they come in? And I think one big picture when you zoom out at all of these cases, you start off with, all right, something really bad happened. And I think for any tough case, you want to first start off, are your damages significant enough for you to invest the time to investigate it? You know, if you have a gunshot case where I guess it could be a minor injury where maybe just scrape their arm or something, all right, am I going to put the time into this? Same with a government entity case or an ATV case. You want to first, do I have significant enough damages to put in all that energy and time? What are some other cases you've seen like that?
Well, I was just going to say, to put a bow on the gun cases, the other factor to look at is just on the manufacturer side. And so it may be a potential products case. And so you want to look if it's some sort of misfire or if there have been similar issues before. And so don't just assume that it was user error and there's no insurance there. So make sure you're running down all those traps. But other types of cases through the firm, I mean, it's kind of whenever there's been a bad harm, kind of like you said. So drowning cases comes to mind. I know there's been some really unfortunate circumstances, but where we got some really good results for some clients.
Yeah, drowning cases, you know, or cases involving water where someone gets hurt or killed. A lot of times that's going to involve, you know, maybe a child who was left unsupervised, or it's an area, a lot of times it could be an apartment complex that doesn't have the right safety precautions, like a down gate. And unfortunately, you see it in some of the most downtrodden rental situations because they don't put the money in to keep the area secure. I know recently we had a case involving a fire case where an apartment complex didn't have the proper fire equipment and it nearly burned down, and our clients had to jump up a 3-story window to escape.
Yeah, you know, fire cases, we've had gas explosion cases, those are interesting. Gas explosions happen a lot more often than people realize on a nationwide basis. You know, along the ATV line, we see a lot of golf cart cases. People get injured on golf carts quite a bit.
I remember one time I had a case in a golf cart where he was on a golf course and he was driving to the hole, and there was like a giant crater that had been covered up by grass and you couldn't see it. And he's just driving to the hole and he goes through the crater and goes like 15 feet down. Luckily he lived, but it was one of the craziest cases. It was actually ended up being kind of a tricky case because it was trying to figure out what could he see, what could he not see. You know, he had a couple beers, so is there alcohol involved? But that was a really interesting, tough case. Gas explosions, those are interesting ones. That's a tough one those can be difficult to investigate and pursue.
I was going to say, when you mentioned like golf cart cases, other things like that, and also going back to the ATV, is a lot of states, I know Texas is one of them, where watch out for the recreational use statute. If the public land is used for recreational use, then there might be some additional reasons that the government basically gets off the hook, or the homeowner, or even the landowner. So it's just another pitfall to watch out for. Yeah, there's definitely been some interesting cases all throughout the firm. But I always kind of start with, was there someone at fault? Why this whole thing happened? And usually there's a why as to why it all started.
So where do expert witnesses come into play with these types of cases?
Right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. You got to get them from the get-go.
Yeah. And if you were not being led by an expert in that particular area to, you know, what to look for and to vet the case, then you're probably spinning your wheels, because unless you have real experience in some of these areas, you're not going to know what to look for. That's why you need the expert's eye to direct you.
Yeah, and it can be tough to find the right expert. So a lot of times we'll start with PACER and look in federal courts to see other lawsuits like it, to see if you can track down experts that were used in that case. What are some of the other places to find an expert in someone who shot a gun while riding an ATV drunk and ended up drowning?
Well, I typically will start with colleagues. I'll look on our TLA listservs.
What's a TLA?
TLA is a trial lawyer association. So whether it be your local, state, or national group, you want to belong to those groups and have access to those listservs because you can really get good information and find good experts by being a member. There's also, third-party companies that you can go to look for experts. I typically don't like to start with those, but in a pinch, we'll go to them. And you just want to ask around to get names. Sometimes it's fun it's good to find experts who haven't ever done it before. If you have a shooting case, call a local gun range or call somebody who, in law enforcement, who they might know somebody who's retired who could talk about it.
A lot of times I think it's really cool too. They get excited. You call someone, do you want to be a consulting witness? Like, oh, that sounds neat. The thing too, be careful with your expert witnesses on buying what they tell you right out of the gate if they are a professional expert, because a lot of times they may be more excited about your case than necessarily warrants. They're not attorneys, so they're not necessarily looking at the pitfalls the same way you would. So make sure you're still evaluating it that way. And I'd also say focus groups can be really helpful in these types of cases.
Yeah, find out what they want to know, go from there. But I think you really hit the nail on the head on experts. I haven't met a professional expert that hasn't told me I've got a great case. So I think you have to really kind of vet them and play devil's advocate and find out what, if you really believe them and why, and really challenge them kind of from a devil's advocate perspective.
And ask friends, ask family, hey, what do you think about this set of facts? Do you think this is wrong, that this happened? Who would you think is at fault? Do your own free focus group to get information. That can be really valuable too, helping you decide whether or not you think it's something that's worth pursuing.
Yeah, and you got to do that a certain way. You either need to have someone like my wife who will tell me that my case is terrible, or you need to tell people, a friend of mine has a case like this. What do you think? Because if it's a friend, or on the other end, my dad has never heard a case he didn't love of mine, just like, that's the coolest case. You need to get, $100 million. You're going to win. And that's not the best advice all the time.
It's been really interesting to see kind of different people's perspectives on cases. And I think it's good free focus group, and it'll kind of open your eyes to different thoughts on how to handle it.
Well, everyone, this has been another awesome conversation, hopefully. I hope some people got some value out of it. I had a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, this was great.
And it's good to be back in person. So until next time, if you have any questions on a case like this or one similar, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us, you can call us. We're happy to talk through any issues you have and hopefully give you some help along the way. Until next time, thanks. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Effective Lawyer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to rate it 5 stars and leave us a review. To get notified about new episodes that are upcoming or have been released, go to zdfirm.com/podcast to sign up for our mailing list.